Amber Hayes slammed her car door shut, gripping her tote bag as she rushed across the parking garage. She was already 10 minutes late for her job interview, and the last thing she needed was to waste more time circling for a spot. The only available space was marked reserved, but she had no choice. She parked her beat-up sedan, took a deep breath, and sprinted toward the elevator. What she didn't know was that the spot belonged to Lucas Whitmore, a man who never tolerated inconvenience. A man used to control. And a man who, in just a few minutes, was about to be very, very irritated. Lucas Whitmore strode into the underground parking garage, his sharp gaze immediately locking onto the old, dented car sitting in his reserved space. He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. This was his building. His empire. His rules. And someone had decided those rules didn't apply to them. His driver, Nathan, stood beside him, looking equally unimpressed. "Want me to have it towed?" Nathan asked. Lucas didn't answer immediately. He was already in a foul mood. His morning meeting had been a disaster, and now this. He strode toward the car, noting the worn-out tires, the scratches on the door, and the fact that whoever owned this mess on wheels had clearly left in a hurry. "No," he finally said. "I want to know who thought this was a good idea." Amber sat stiffly in the small office, her palms damp with anxiety. "I'm sorry, Miss Hayes, but we've already filled the position." The hiring manager had barely looked at her before delivering the rejection. It didn't matter that she had the qualifications. Didn't matter that she had rushed there, parked illegally, and prayed for an opportunity. She had nothing to show for it. Deflated, she trudged back to the parking garage, reaching for her keys, only to realize a man was standing beside her car. Arms crossed, looking like he was ready to start a war. Her stomach dropped. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a dark, impossibly expensive suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. His blue eyes were sharp, assessing her like she was some kind of calculated risk. "Is this your car?" His voice was deep, smooth, but laced with irritation. Amber swallowed. Yes." Lucas let out a slow breath, as if trying to control his annoyance. "You parked in my spot." Took her a second to process what he'd said. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was late for an interview and there were no other spots and..." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I don't care about your excuses." Amber bristled. "I just apologized." Lucas's brow arched slightly, as if surprised by her tone. "You don't own the whole parking garage," she added, then realized with a sinking feeling that he very well might. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her. Really studied her. Her scuffed shoes. Her cheap blazer. The way she clutched her bag like it was her last lifeline. "You were here for a job interview?" he asked. More of a statement than a question. Amber nodded. "Not that it matters." "I didn't get it." Lucas didn't know why that bothered him. He didn't know why he was still standing there, wasting time on a stranger who had caused him a minor inconvenience. But there was something about her. Something unapologetic. Unpolished. And completely unaffected by his presence. He should have walked away. Instead, he did the opposite. "What's your background?" he asked. Amber blinked. "Excuse me?" He gestured vaguely. "What were you applying for?" She hesitated. "Marketing assistant." Lucas tilted his head. "And they turned you down?" Amber let out a dry laugh. "Apparently, I wasn't what they were looking for." He didn't know why he said what he said next. Maybe it was impulse. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe it was the way she'd stood her ground against him when most people wouldn't dare. "I own this building," he said. "And the company that rejected you." Amber's jaw nearly dropped. "Oh. Come to my office tomorrow," Lucas continued. 9 a.m. sharp. Amber frowned. "Why?" "You wanted a marketing job." His lips twitched, not quite a smile but close. "Let's see if you're actually worth hiring." Amber didn't sleep that night. She spent hours researching Lucas Whitmore, billionaire CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, one of the most powerful men in the country, and apparently the guy whose parking space she had stolen. What had she gotten herself into? The next morning, she arrived at his office 5 minutes early, dressed in her best, though admittedly cheap, outfit, feeling equal parts anxious and irritated. If he was doing this just to toy with her, she'd walk right out. But the moment she was led into his office, a massive, sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Lucas didn't look like a man who wasted time. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Amber sat. Lucas leaned forward slightly. "Convince me why I should hire you." Amber took a deep breath. If she had any chance at turning this disaster into an opportunity, she had to go all in. So she did. She spoke about her experience, her ideas, the campaign she would run if given the chance. She didn't hold back, and she didn't let his intimidating presence shake her. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Then you're hired." Amber blinked. "What?" "You start tomorrow." She stared at him, trying to figure out if this was some kind of power move. Just like that. Lucas gave her a look. "Do you always question good news?" Amber exhaled, standing up. "Fine. But I'm not going to be some charity case. I'll earn this." Lucas's lips twitched again. There it was, that same almost smile. "I'd expect nothing less, Miss Hayes." As Amber left the office, she didn't realize just how much her life had changed. And neither did Lucas. 'Cause what had started as a parking spot dispute was about to turn into something neither of them saw coming. Amber arrived at the office the next morning, clutching a steaming cup of coffee she could barely afford. The reality of her situation had fully settled in overnight. She wasn't just working for a company, she was working for Lucas Whitmore, a man whose presence was as commanding as his reputation. The receptionist directed her to a sleek, glass-walled conference room where Lucas was already waiting. He glanced up the moment she walked in, his gaze sharp and assessing. If he was surprised that she had actually shown up, he didn't show it. "Sit." She did, setting her coffee down and straightening her posture. Without preamble, Lucas slid a folder across the table. "Your first project." Amber opened it, scanning the contents. "Product launch campaign. High stakes. Fast turnaround. Kind of assignment that most new hires wouldn't touch for months." "You're serious?" she asked. Lucas leaned back, watching her. "You said you weren't a charity case." "Prove it." Amber squared her shoulders. "Fine." She spent the next hour outlining her ideas, pointing out gaps in the current strategy, suggesting improvements. Lucas listened, his expression unreadable, occasionally interjecting with pointed questions that forced her to think on her feet. By the time she finished, there was a charged silence between them. Finally, he spoke. "Not bad." It wasn't exactly high praise, but coming from him, it felt like a victory. Before she could respond, the door swung open and a man in an expensive pinstriped suit strode in. He was older, with sharp features and an air of importance. "Lucas, we need to." The man stopped short when he saw Amber. His eyes flicked to her, assessing before turning back to Lucas. "Didn't realize you had company." "This is Amber Hayes," Lucas said. "She's handling the upcoming launch." The man's brows lifted. "Interesting." Amber didn't miss the skepticism in his tone. Lucas's expression remained impassive. "What do you need, Richard?" Richard hesitated for a fraction of a second before shifting back into business mode. "We have an issue with the overseas division. I need a word." Lucas nodded once. "Amber, you're dismissed for now. Have your first round of ideas on my desk by the end of the day." She stood, gathering her things. As she walked out, she could feel Richard's gaze following her. She didn't know why, but something about the exchange left her unsettled. By the afternoon, Amber had thrown herself into the project. She worked from a temporary desk in the open workspace, poring over data, refining her strategy, making sure every detail was perfect. Hours passed, and she was so focused that she didn't notice Lucas approaching until he spoke. "You're still here." She looked up, slightly startled. "Of course I am." Lucas glanced at her screen. "Show me what you've got." Amber took a breath, then launched into her presentation. She expected him to poke holes in everything, to tear it apart, but instead, he listened. Really listened. When she finished, he studied her for a long moment before nodding. "You've exceeded expectations." Something warm flickered in her chest. But then he added, "Not by much." Amber narrowed her eyes. "You don't give compliments easily, do you?" Lucas's lips twitched slightly. "No." she exhaled, shaking her head. Noted. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting slightly before he silenced it. Amber watched him carefully. Something wrong? He didn't answer right away. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. But Amber knew a deflection when she heard one. Till she didn't push. Not yet. The next day, Lucas called her into his office. She expected more work, more critiques. What she didn't expect was for him to hand her a card with an address on it. "What's this?" she asked. "A company event." "You're coming." Amber blinked. "Excuse me." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "Consider it part of your job." She frowned. "You want me to go to a party?" "It's not a party. It's a networking event. And you need to learn how to navigate these circles." Amber hesitated. "I don't exactly own anything that fits those circles." Lucas didn't even blink. "I'll take care of it." Before she could argue, he had already moved on to his next task, dismissing her with a glance. Amber walked out of his office feeling completely off balance. What exactly had she just agreed to? That evening, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a dress, not just any dress, but a masterpiece of fabric and design, more expensive than anything she had ever owned. Amber ran her fingers over the material, stunned. Lucas Whitmore had sent this. She didn't know what unsettled her more, the extravagance or the fact that for the first time she was starting to wonder just how much power he had over her life already. And why, despite every instinct telling her to keep her distance, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to resist. Amber stepped out of the car and onto the marble-paved entrance of the exclusive venue. The sheer scale of the event was overwhelming. Glittering chandeliers hovered above a sea of impeccably dressed guests, the air humming with the kind of quiet luxury she had never experienced before. She had expected a typical corporate function. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a networking event, it was an elite gathering of power players. The kind of people who made decisions that shaped industries. And Lucas Whitmore was standing at the center of it all, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his presence commanding without effort. His gaze flicked to her the moment she arrived. For a second, something unreadable passed over his expression. Then he strode toward her, his movements deliberate and assured. "You clean up well," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Amber lifted her chin. "I manage." His lips twitched, the closest thing to amusement she'd seen from him. "Come with me." He led her through the crowd past murmured greetings and lingering stares. People recognized him instantly, stepping aside as if his presence alone dictated the flow of the room. Amber, however, wasn't invisible. The moment they entered the main hall, whispers followed. "Who is she?" "New hire." Interesting choice for Whitmore. She ignored them as best she could, but her spine stiffened. She wasn't here to be Lucas's accessory. She was here to prove she belonged. He stopped beside a cluster of executives, seamlessly introducing her to a man in his 60s with a shrewd gaze and a calculating smile. "Richard told me you were bringing someone unexpected," the man said. His tone was smooth but laced with curiosity. Lucas was unfazed. "Amber is handling the upcoming launch." The man's brows lifted slightly. "That's a significant project for a newcomer." Amber met his gaze without hesitation. "I don't plan to fail." A beat of silence. Then the man chuckled, amused by her confidence. "I see why you brought her," he murmured to Lucas before turning back to his conversation. Amber exhaled quietly. She wasn't naive. She knew this world wasn't kind to outsiders. But she hadn't come here to be underestimated. Lucas leaned in slightly. "You handled that well." Amber glanced at him. "You were testing me." His expression didn't change. "I needed to know if you could hold your ground." Amber resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "You could have just asked. That wouldn't have been nearly as effective." Before she could reply, a woman in an emerald gown approached, her gaze flicking between them with thinly veiled interest. "Lucas," she said smoothly. "You didn't mention you were bringing a date." Amber stiffened. Lucas didn't even blink. "Amber isn't a date. She's here for business." The woman's smile didn't falter, but there was something sharp behind it. "Of course." "Well, enjoy your evening." As soon as she walked away, Amber turned to Lucas. You really know how to attract attention. It comes with the territory. Amber sighed. I'm not sure I like it. He studied her for a moment. Then why are you still standing here? It was a challenge. And Amber never walked away from a challenge. She lifted her chin. Because I'm not afraid of it. For the first time that evening, something shifted in Lucas's expression. Not quite admiration, but something close. Good, he said simply. The night continued, a blur of introductions and strategic conversations. Amber took mental notes, absorbing the dynamics at play. Lucas moved effortlessly through the crowd, but she noticed something. He never left her side for long. It wasn't possessiveness. It was something else. As the evening wound down, Lucas finally turned to her. Come with me. She hesitated, but followed as he led her to a balcony overlooking the city. The air was crisp, the noise of the party fading behind them. Why did you really bring me here? She asked. Lucas rested his hands on the railing, his gaze fixed on the skyline. I wanted to see how you handled pressure. Amber crossed her arms. And he finally looked at her. You didn't disappoint. She wasn't sure why, but the quiet acknowledgement meant more than she expected. Amber exhaled. You're impossible, you know that? Lucas's lips curved slightly. So I've been told. For a moment, they simply stood there. The silence stretching between them, not uncomfortable, not forced. Just there. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Amber hadn't expected to see Lucas the next morning. After the event, she'd gone home with too many thoughts swirling in her head, replaying every moment. The way people had watched her. The way Lucas had stayed close. The way something between them felt like it was shifting. But Lucas Whitmore was a man who never let emotions dictate his actions. So when she stepped into the office, she expected business as usual. She was wrong. The moment she reached her desk, her phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Lucas wants to see you. When she entered his office, he stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his gaze on the city beyond. The morning light cast sharp lines over his features, making him look even more unreadable than usual. She walked in, letting the door shut behind her. The air between them was taut, as if something unspoken from the night before hadn't quite settled. You handled yourself well, he said, not turning around. Amber folded her arms. You already said that. He finally turned. And for a brief second, something flickered in his expression, something almost hesitant. But it was gone before she could name it. I have another event this weekend, he said, his voice even. I want you there. Amber blinked. Another one? His gaze didn't waver. This one is different. It's not business. It's personal. That caught her off guard. Lucas Whitmore was known for keeping his private life out of the spotlight. The fact that he was inviting her into it meant something. She hesitated. Why me? He stepped closer, his presence consuming the space between them. Because I trust you. Her breath caught. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. As if trust wasn't something he gave easily. As if she had somehow crossed an invisible line, stepping into a place he didn't let many people reach. Amber's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay steady. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. Lucas's gaze lingered on her for a second longer before he nodded. And just like that, something between them shifted again. The event was held at a sprawling estate outside the city, the kind of place that didn't just scream wealth, it whispered it. Quiet, effortless elegance. Amber stepped out of the car, the evening air cool against her skin as she took in the setting. Lush gardens lined the entrance, soft golden lights casting a warm glow over guests already mingling on the terrace. Lucas was waiting for her near the entrance, dressed in a tailored black suit that made him look impossibly polished and untouchable. But when he saw her, something in his expression softened, just slightly. He offered his arm. She hesitated for only a second before taking it. As they moved through the crowd, whispers followed. This wasn't like the last event. This time, the attention wasn't just on Lucas. It was on her. She caught fragments of conversation as they passed. Who is she? Not just an employee. Lucas never brings anyone to these things. Amber kept her head high, refusing to shrink under the scrutiny. Lucas must have noticed because he leaned in slightly, his voice low and calm. "They're curious. Let them be." His steadiness grounded her more than she wanted to admit. They stopped near a group of older men, all of whom greeted Lucas with the kind of familiarity that suggested long histories and deep pockets. One of them, a distinguished man with silver hair and sharp eyes, turned his attention to Amber. "You must be the reason Lucas has been so distracted lately." Amber froze, caught off guard. Lucas didn't miss a beat. "Amber is more than capable of holding her own." The man chuckled. "I don't doubt it. She wouldn't be here otherwise." Amber wasn't sure what to make of that, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. The evening continued, filled with conversations that danced between light-hearted and strategic. But through it all, Lucas never strayed too far from her side. At one point, they stepped away from the crowd, finding a quieter corner near the edge of the garden. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses faded into the background, leaving only the night air between them. Amber exhaled. "You really live in a different world." Lucas studied her. "Does it bother you?" She thought about it for a moment. "No. But it's unfamiliar." His gaze didn't leave hers. "You don't belong to this world, but you don't shy away from it either." She tilted her head. "Is that a compliment?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted. "We need a word, Lucas." Amber turned to see Richard approaching, expression unreadable. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Excuse me." Amber took that as her cue to step away, giving them space. As she moved back toward the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unspoken lingered between her and Lucas. Something neither of them were quite ready to name. But the pull was there, and it was growing stronger. Amber wandered back toward the party, the glow of the estate casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. The air hummed with chatter and the soft clinking of champagne glasses, but she barely registered any of it. Her mind was still tangled in the conversation she'd just had with Lucas. The way he'd looked at her, studied her, as if she were a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. She reached the edge of the terrace when a voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You must be Amber." She turned to find a woman standing nearby, elegant yet imposing, with a presence that demanded attention. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that held too much knowledge. Amber instinctively straightened. "And you are?" The woman's lips curved slightly. "Elena Whitmore." The name hit her like a jolt of electricity. Lucas's mother. Amber's pulse stumbled. She hadn't expected to meet Lucas's family, not like this, not unprepared. But if Elena had sought her out, it meant she had already drawn conclusions. "You're different from the women who usually accompany my son," Elena observed, her voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable weight. Amber wasn't sure how to respond. "I'm not accompanying him. I work for him." Elena's gaze remained steady. "Do you?" Amber didn't flinch. "Yes." A beat of silence stretched between them, charged, unspoken. Then Elena's expression shifted, as if she had reached some private decision. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Amber followed Elena Whitmore down a winding path illuminated by tiny garden lights, the sounds of the party fading into the distance. The older woman walked with poise and purpose, not saying a word until they reached a quiet bench near the edge of a fountain. Elena sat, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Amber remained standing for a moment, unsure whether she was expected to join her. But Elena gestured to the empty space beside her, so Amber slowly sat down. "I like to see who my son keeps close," Elena began, her tone calm but calculated. "Most people orbit him for power, money, or prestige. You don't seem to fit into those categories." Amber kept her face neutral. "Maybe because I don't." Elena studied her carefully. "Then why are you here?" Amber met her gaze. "Because I earned it." A flicker of something, surprise, maybe respect, flashed in Elena's eyes. "Confidence suits you. But don't mistake Lucas's attention for favor. He doesn't trust easily." "I've noticed," Amber replied. Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "You've made an impression. That much is clear. But impressions can fade quickly in this world. And this world isn't kind." Amber didn't respond immediately. She understood what was being said and what wasn't. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a warning. "I appreciate your concern," Amber said carefully, "but I'm not here for anything more than the work." Elena's expression didn't change. "Let's hope that stays true." With that, she stood. Amber followed, both of them returning in silence to the glowing chaos of the estate. Later that night, Lucas found her standing near one of the tall windows overlooking the garden. "What did my mother say to you?" Amber turned toward him, surprised by the directness of the question. "She wanted to meet the woman who parked in your space and ended up in your inner circle." Lucas's brow lifted slightly. "And?" Amber hesitated. "She was polite. And very clear." He exhaled. "She tends to be. I think she was trying to protect you." Lucas's gaze darkened. "She protects the image of our family." "That's not the same thing." Amber studied him, something unspoken hanging in the air. "Is that why you keep people at a distance?" His jaw clenched. "Sometimes distance is safer. For everyone." Amber wanted to ask more. Push further. But something in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she nodded. "Good night, Lucas." He didn't stop her as she walked away. But something about the way he watched her go felt like a silent tug neither of them were quite ready to confront. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Amber poured herself into the campaign, late nights, early mornings, constant pressure. But through it all, Lucas remained present. Not hovering, but watching. Guiding. Testing. Their connection deepened, not just professionally but in the unspoken moments. The lingering glances. The tension that hovered in the space between their words. But just as everything began to fall into place, it all came crashing down. Amber was heading to Lucas's office with a new proposal in hand when she heard voices coming from inside, raised, tense. "You're being reckless, Lucas," Richard said. "She's not one of us." "I don't need your approval," Lucas replied coolly. "This isn't about approval. It's about protecting everything we've built. She earned her place. She's a liability." Amber froze outside the door, heart pounding. "Don't do this," Richard added. "You're letting your guard down. She's going to ruin you." There was a long silence. Then Lucas's voice, low and firm. "You're wrong." Amber backed away before she could hear more. Her throat tightened. Didn't matter how hard she worked, how much she proved herself, there would always be people who saw her as less. As disposable. As a threat. That night, she considered quitting. Walking away before she got pulled into something deeper. But when she opened her inbox, she found a single message from Lucas. "I trust you. Don't make me regret it." Just 7 words. But they kept her from walking away. Because if Lucas Whitmore, who trusted no one, was willing to give her a chance, then she wasn't about to waste it. The next few weeks were a blur of tension and progress. Amber kept her head down, delivering results with relentless precision. Her campaign strategy exceeded expectations. The numbers spoke for themselves. The doubters grew quieter. But the whispers never stopped completely. Every time she walked into a room, she could feel the eyes. Judging. Waiting. Wondering how long she'd last. Lucas remained steadfast. Unflinching. But even he couldn't shield her from everything. One afternoon, she found an anonymous envelope on her desk. No name. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. Her and Lucas talking on the balcony at the event. The angle made it look intimate. Written across the bottom in bold red ink. "Be careful who you trust." Amber stared at it, heart racing. This wasn't just office gossip. It was a threat. She brought it straight to Lucas. His jaw clenched as he examined the photo. "Cowards," he muttered. "Who would do this?" she asked. Lucas's gaze burned with restrained fury. "Someone who's scared of you," Amber scoffed. "Me? I'm a marketing assistant, not a threat to an empire." Lucas looked at her, and for the first time there was no sarcasm, no guarded tone, just sincerity. "You're not a threat because of your position. You're a threat because you don't play by their rules. And you're winning anyway." Amber swallowed hard. "So what now?" she asked. He met her eyes. Now we show them exactly why you belong here. From that day forward, Lucas made it clear to everyone where Amber stood. She wasn't just another employee. She was his right hand. And the more people tried to undermine her, the more determined she became to succeed. Amber worked harder than she ever had. Every meeting, every pitch, every challenge, she attacked it with focus and fire. Her name started to carry weight in the building. Not because of Lucas, but because of her. Still, the tension between them never disappeared. Late nights turned into quiet conversations. Glances lingered a little too long. And every time they stood close, the air around them seemed to shift. But nothing happened. Not yet. Until the gala. It was the company's biggest event of the year, a black tie celebration of success and power. Everyone would be there, including the press. Amber wore a deep burgundy gown that made her feel like someone else, someone bolder, someone who belonged. Lucas greeted her at the entrance, dressed in a classic tuxedo, his expression unreadable. "You look," he paused, eyes scanning her slowly. "Effective." Amber smirked. Was that supposed to be a compliment? His lips curved slightly. "Take it or leave it." The night unfolded like a dream. Champagne. Applause. Speeches. Recognition. When Lucas took the stage, he mentioned her by name. Publicly. Acknowledging her contribution to one of the company's most successful campaigns to date. It was a declaration. And it didn't go unnoticed. Afterward, they slipped away from the noise, finding a quiet balcony once again. The same way they had weeks ago. Only this time, something was different. Amber turned to him. "Why me?" Lucas looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Because you challenge me." She stepped closer. "And you like being challenged?" He didn't answer with words. He kissed her. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was intense, like something that had been simmering for too long and had finally reached a boiling point. When they pulled apart, the air between them was electric. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Amber smiled. "Then stop doing it." He didn't. From that moment, everything changed. Their connection deepened, personally, professionally, emotionally. There were still challenges. Whispers. Position. But they faced it together. And slowly, the empire that had once seen Amber Hayes as an outsider started to realize she wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't the girl who parked in the wrong space anymore. She was the woman who redefined her worth. And Lucas Whitmore? He wasn't the untouchable CEO anymore. He was the man who let someone in. And together, they built something even stronger than success. They built trust.